What's up, you guys, and welcome back to Philline, a podcast about where we talk about what it's like being in our 20s in the 20s. For today's episode, I have my cousin Sheena, who I'm super excited to come and join and just be a big part of Asian American Heritage Month. We're going to be talking about just Filipino things and mental health. So I'm just excited to get this episode started. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to Filipine. Today I have a very awesome guest, my cousin Sheena.
Woo, hello.
I guess I'll start this episode with, how is everything? I haven't really talked to you in a long time because I actually don't know. I feel like just life's been getting so busy and stressful. So how's life going for you?
Yeah, no, it's honestly been a while now that I think about it, like almost
Yeah.
a year. It's
Hmm.
crazy. Like sometimes, New Jersey's like right there,
Yeah.
but it's still like pretty brutal to commute out. And like definitely, like I think we've both just been like really busy.
Oh yeah.
So on my end, I mean, I guess things have been good. Uh, you know, PhD life is just like bountiful stress. It's just like it never really stops, and it's really difficult to like find a break. So it's
Yeah.
you know trying to just stave off the burnout, but we chugging along.
How far in are you in your PhD now at this point?
I am just about to finish up my third year, so in
Wow.
August marks my fourth year.
Yeah. And what about in your PhD stuff? What are you like currently doing it in right now? And like, what are you passionate about?
Oh yeah, um, so basically, I guess to introduce myself, like I am doing my PhD at NYU. Um, in the fields of both biophysics and molecular oncology. So, in other
Hmm.
words, you could describe me as like a cancer researcher,
Hmm.
structural biologist, or biochemist. And my thesis work specifically examines like a mechanism implicated in lung cancer metastasis. So we're using these really fancy biophysical techniques to solve the atomic structure of this complex implicated in cancer. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So, I guess in the end of the day, like the hope is that this work will lead to maybe some novel chemotherapeutic that can help lung cancer. And, that's just something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so cool what you're doing. Super complex, honestly. Every time I have a conversation with you about just everything school, I just get so interested in what you're doing because, I originally was like doing biomedical engineering in school and then I kind of fell in love more with numbers. So now I'm kind of working with data. So it's kind of cool to see somebody who kind of stuck with the whole science field because I definitely like lost touch with that. But it's really cool. I'm really excited for you. I'm like I feel like you are doing such amazing things and I'm just it's cool to know that my cousin Filipino just super powerful and smart and just doing great things.
Oh, thanks. Well, it runs in the family for the record. So,
Yeah. Definitely. So I guess this month is, Asian American Heritage Month, Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a lot of really important holidays or, like, I guess, awarenesses in this month that are super important to me. And even just with mental health in general, I feel like it's kind of becoming something more important for me. But, how has, I guess, life been for you as an Asian American, in terms of maturing, in terms of how your life is versus your parents and everything like that?
right, right. Actually, it's really interesting that uh, Asian American Heritage Month coincides with Mental Health Awareness Month because
Yeah.
I think both are quite applicable, especially like in this day and age.
Hmm.
And I think, as Asian Americans, we face specific mental health issues like because of our culture.
Hmm.
And by that I mean like there's just this stigma that's perpetrated or perpetuated by like the older generation that makes it very hard to talk about. Um, so I guess just on that topic, uh, this is like something I haven't really like talked about at all with family,
Mhm.
apart from like my younger brother. But I think it was maybe a few like half a year ago, 6 months ago. I was recently like diagnosed with like clinical depression.
Okay.
So like I'm very open about this. I've been seeing a therapist for over a year now,
Mm.
for like social anxiety, but because there was just a lot of crazy stuff happening back in November, with like family stress and
Mm.
also like with my work with the PhD, um, I and also with COVID, right, with the pandemic, I
Yeah.
just ended up finding myself in a really dark place, and like my therapist suggested that I actually talked to like an actual psychiatrist who then
Mhm.
um, like recommended I start taking like medicine for it.
Mhm.
And I remember you know like in that moment it just like it didn't really feel real because I think um, with like Asian culture or like even Filipino culture, like this
Yeah.
whole thing of mental health is like it's all in your head, like it's
Yep.
not real. And actually I remember I think it was back in December actually. We had a guest speaker, Kevin Nadal, who is a psychologist, but he specifically studies Filipino American psychology. And so
Okay.
he was describing basically like Philline mental health in the time of COVID. And there was this one description that really stuck with me. He described it as like smiling depression, where as like Filipinos, we tend to kind of just like put a smile on our face and just grin and bear it when internally we're experiencing those signs of depression. And because we're taught
Mm.
to like not give into like we're taught that it's not real, it makes it a lot harder to catch and a lot harder to also like discuss with like I guess like family and such.
Mhm.
So because I felt like uh yeah, this isn't a real thing, it actually took a lot of people to convince me to actually like seek help for it and like
Yeah.
actually try the medicine. But um but in the end of the day, after a lot of like talking with friends and other support systems, I gave it a shot, and I will be like a really strong advocate for it. Like it helped me for sure, and 6 months later I'm in a much better place than I was like back then. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's the testimony in terms of mental health. Like it's hard to talk about, but um, I feel like it's just annoying that like there's so much stigma around it. But the fact of the
Yeah.
matter is that like virtually everyone will like experience some form of like mental health issue at some point in their life because of just how stressful everything is and such.
Yeah.
Um, but it sucks that we're all scared to talk about it because it's I guess just yeah, it's a lot more commonplace than we think it is. So yeah.
No, definitely. I kind of experienced that too, that in the sense that, if I'm going through something, it's really just this mental thought of just, you just got to deal with it and get over it. Like, it's really not a big deal. Like, nothing's ever a big deal. And it's funny that, well, it's not funny, but we're talking about this because I think that for a really long time, I was afraid to go to therapy. And I actually just have like an appointment coming up this coming Monday, I think. And
Oh, is this your
I've
first
just
one?
never really yeah, I've just never I've been so nervous, honestly, and I just know it's been getting worse. So I always knew, I don't know if this is how you felt at first. I always knew that there was something going on with me, but I was just like, again, shoving under the rug, like, it's just a phase, it's just a feeling, it'll go away. And then COVID hit, and when I was stuck inside, like everything was kind of coming back. And whether it's previous experience with people I've had in my life or just emotionally, and then I'm anxious and staying up, most nights I'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking about some really like dark things that I'm like, wow, I think I actually should try to talk to somebody, because sometimes I could just be sitting here enjoying my day and out of nowhere, like, I'll just be thinking about really dark things. Like for me, the thing that kind of sits on my head and my chest is like the thought of the afterlife, if that makes sense. and it's just something that like creeps into my head, and I think because of COVID, it's kind of made it worse. So I was like, you know what? Like last week, I was like, let me just try it. So it's cool that you're opening up for going to therapy, and you know, do you think that like it's helping you? Do you think that therapy's kind of been like the right direction in terms of with everything going on with you?
Oh, 100%. I think honestly going to therapy has been probably like one of my top 3 like most important decisions in the last like year or so. It's
Mhm.
just, I think the biggest thing um is like, mental health issues aside, like actual like psychological like diagnoses aside, um,
Yeah.
just this idea of validation, being able to talk to this like unbiased person who's just there to
Yeah.
like, for an hour, just like listen to you and listen to your feelings and just validate them, um, is just, it's so powerful. I guess you know, a lot of my stresses and my anxieties are just me doubting myself, like, or putting the blame on myself. That's a really big one.
Mhm.
Kind of just like, like talking myself down, kind of just like putting down my self worth. But then, talking about like all of these thoughts with my therapist has, I don't know, he's just really supportive. Like he's just, like I'll say
Yeah.
these things and he's like, that's ridiculous. Like, do you hear what you're saying? And well, he'll like force me to almost like combat like the self-critical thoughts,
Yeah.
which yeah. And then eventually, I found myself catching like those thoughts and realizing that, I'm being too harsh on myself and like being too critical. And I guess, it's just really taken a weight off my shoulders. So like, I'm really glad that you're trying it out for the first time tomorrow, or
Mhm.
sorry, like on Monday. And I hope it goes well. But also, if you find that the person that you're talking to isn't like a right fit, like don't give up hope on that either. Uh,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
definitely like my worst fear is opening up to somebody and they don't care.
No, exactly. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
their job to care.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's just like after I've started it like a year ago, I've been telling all of my friends about my experiences, and now they've like started seeing like a therapist as well. Because
Mhm.
luckily for us, it's like free through to school.
Oh,
So
nice.
and yeah, like all of us agree, like it's just super life changing. Like we'll literally meet up and just talk about like what our therapist told us like the other day. It's so
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, like I'm sure it'll be great. And yeah, you gotta let me know how it goes.
I definitely will. I'll definitely tell you after the fact. But this is actually interesting. A lot of therapists nowadays are kind of doing telehealth or like phone calls. So I don't know if
Right.
that's going to be 100% effective for me just because sometimes I like this kind of person to person like contact, eye contact, you know what I mean?
Of course.
So I'll see how it goes. I'm really nervous because like I just feel like growing up Filipino culture, and it's not 100% blame towards Filipino culture, but just I feel like a lot of things that I've been avoiding basically are going to come back, and I know that I've been avoiding them. I just don't even know where to start at this point, and I just like feel like the therapist will really help me find out the center of my issues, if that makes sense, because I feel like I'm aware that there's all these problems around me, but I'm not putting the time aside, and that's a problem. When life is so busy, we're not putting the time to not just face our issues, our feelings, but like also just be aware of when we're kind of pushing ourselves too hard.
No, 100%. And like, you bringing up the Filipino culture thing, I think there's also like the shame for asking help.
Yeah.
Like you got to figure everything out on your own. And just like that whole mentality, that was what really messed me up too.
Yeah.
So it's why like, like seeing a therapist or, taking medicine for depression is so taboo in our culture. Like it's something I'm going to be really honest. Like I haven't even told my parents about it. Like they don't know.
Yeah.
And I've been dealing with it for like half a year. So,
I
um,
I understand where you're coming from because it's hard. I mean, I feel like my parents kind of are in the same, it'll kind of be shoved off as a joke at first, and that's like the hardest part. And I understand like where you're coming from
Right. But
exactly.
also,
But
like as a child, you don't want to worry them, right?
yeah,
Like you don't
yeah,
want to place a burden on your parents. So
yeah, definitely. Because you're sort of okay, but figuring it out, and it's like you got to let yourself do it. And then I feel like my parents also are like super worrisome too. And that just ties into the whole thing of why I'm so worrisome. I'm so anxious. I'm always worried about the next day, the next step, like the future.
hmm
It's a
yeah.
lot.
Do you also have this whole like oh you're the eldest, like you have to be like the role model for like your younger siblings, so you're not allowed to show weakness. You kind of just have to like look like you have your life together.
Yes,
Because that's
definitely.
another thing. That's another
Yeah.
thing that Filipino culture has taught me that is not necessarily a very healthy mentality.
Hmm.
So there's been a lot of unlearning that's just been going on. But I'm coming out of this whole experience just with a stronger sense of self worth, and really that's like the most important thing. So yeah.
Definitely. And I like that you say unlearning because it really is unlearning. Like, this is the mindset, the way that we were raised, and it's practically the only thing we've known because we've been with our family for so long. And I feel like, once we maybe graduate high school and like go to college, but even not even that, like after college is when you really are exposed to so many different things that makes you realize that, oh, maybe not all of what I was raised on was the right direction or the right mindset or the right way to look at things. And then it kind of like messes with you a lot. And I feel like a lot of people our age are going through that. And, even more so Filipino Americans, but especially our parents and other people's parents who came straight from the Philippines and just have also like a cultural gap between truly Filipino like culture and then American culture.
Right, right. Actually, it's funny because um, so I'm part of these like Filipino groups, and it's like the mentality of Filipino nationals, like people who were raised in the Philippines, like did their studies there and then come to the
Hmm.
U.S. versus like Filipino Americans.
Yeah.
Like they are so different. Like they are two different like groups of people,
Yeah.
and it's just really difficult to navigate, like just where you belong. Like you grew up in America, but you're not necessarily like the perfect image of an American, and you
Hmm.
want to like respect your Filipino culture. But then if you try and join like other people straight from the Philippines, like they just act and know things that are like so different from like the way that you grow up and stuff. Um, so I think there are very unique challenges as a Filipino American, and just like navigating, I guess, like your cultural identity.
Yeah, I think identity issues definitely, honestly, it's not something I think about often, but it's actually something that's I'm sure is super important with me mentally. I just haven't even paid attention to it. And I feel like growing up, I was always confused. Like when I grew up, I was really surrounding myself with strictly Filipinos. And then I feel like as I grew up, I actually started feeling not uncomfortable exactly. That's not really the right word for it, but same way that you were describing that, the Filipinos who went to school in the Philippines and then came here versus people who like really, really grew up here. I didn't know where I fit. And even to this day, I don't know sometimes where I truly belong. And it actually makes me feel a little bit lonely. And I think that also ties into my anxiety. That's, again, it's just stuff that I don't even think about often. But now that I have the time to, because I'm stuck at home. But
Right, right. And then
yeah,
also like, like you and I can't really speak Tagalog. We
yes.
understand it, but we don't speak it. And then I guess because of that, just me personally, like growing up, I never felt like I was quote unquote Filipino enough, which
Mm-hmm.
is ridiculous. Like I feel like I think we were both born in the Philippines and we
Yeah.
both immigrated here. So we're Filipino, like by and large, like there is no doubt about it. But just not being able to speak the mother tongue and sounding American, and
Yeah.
then trying to like talk with like other like quote unquote like real Filipinos, it's just they will kind of like I guess like be like really clicky and just
Mm-hmm.
like
Yes.
stick together, and then I guess people who are like really like I don't want to use the word but like whitewashed
Yeah.
or like
Or
really
just
like quote
different.
unquote American. Yeah, they're just different, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just like hard to find like a balance. like, find like that group who's like accepting regardless of, where you fall in the spectrum of Filipino and American, whatever that means.
Hmm. Yeah. And do you find it easier these days? Like, now, I mean, you're still in school doing your PhD, but it's obviously a different like environment versus maybe bachelor's or high school. Are you finding it harder to stay connected with like the Filipino culture? And, is that like something important to you now, just kind of getting in touch back with like the OG Filipino culture, not Filipino American, but like Filipino Filipino?
No, that's a solid question.
Yeah.
Like, it's something I've been thinking about. I guess, growing up, my both of my parents were really conservative, and I grew up with very Filipino values. So,
Mhm. You and me both,
going,
girl.
but yeah, like, navigating through undergrad and now my PhD, I guess what's really different is it's so much like, if I'm trying to like reconnect or not, but I guess just the
Mhm.
environment that I'm in, like right now versus like where I was in childhood, in the
Yeah.
sense that, like growing up, I lived with my parents and like my brother. I got to hear my language, on a daily basis.
Mhm.
Or like when I started my undergrad, I would go home once a week and, I'd come home to Filipino food and, hearing Tagalog and, my parents like watching like TFC or like some
Yeah.
teleserye. Uh, you know, and then, like also like Christmas, it's like a really big deal. And like every holiday would always have like, we'd have like the lumpia and like the
Yeah.
pancit canton and like all that. Just like the little trays of food. So I never really like growing up. I never really felt like super disconnected from it. But it's like now that I'm in New York City, where like I'm all by myself now.
Mhm.
I like even with COVID especially, like I haven't been home to my family in over a year. Uh,
Wow.
and and also just my like institution. I am one of, I want to say like four Filipinos in
Mhm.
like all of NYU doing a PhD. Because you know how it is. Like the stereotype is Filipinos will go into nursing post
Yeah.
bachelor's, but here I am trying to be a biochemist. Uh, so like we are super underrepresented, sorry, in
Mhm.
science, um, and I feel alone in that respect, where like someone like it's I just never see someone with like my like cultural identity at work. I'm surrounded by like all these
Yeah.
other cultures, and then on top of that, just even my immediate area, like it's predominantly white, Hispanic, black,
Mhm.
um, and it is a very rare day if I ever hear Tagalog just walking down the street.
Yeah.
The grocery stores don't have like the normal condiments like Filipino stuff like what is it like sampalok,
Yeah.
like the powder, the tamarind powder for sinigang. I have to
Yes.
literally commute an hour all the way to Flushing just to find stuff like that.
Wow,
Um,
really?
oh yeah, it's ridiculous. So I guess like it's just purely because now I'm in a city where um, it's just harder to find my people.
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of
definitely.
why I've been feeling like a little more disconnected. But at the same time, I guess it's helped that I've been in a lot of like online Filipino groups with like other students,
Mhm.
like doing all these other things. That's like really helped me um, connect to my culture otherwise. So that was a really convoluted answer. I'm really sorry about that.
No, no, it's definitely, there's not a straightforward answer with anything that I'm asking, but it's I agree with you in some aspects. Weirdly, I needed to branch out of the Filipino culture for me to better understand myself, if that makes sense. Because I felt like I constantly, and this kind of ties back in with being the eldest child and kind of growing up with my family, I was kind of always stuck in a cage, if that makes sense. I was always having someone expect something from me, which was extremely stressful just overall in life. And I didn't even really dig deep into just my feelings about that until recently. Again, I had so much time to think. But I just didn't even realize how much pressure it was to just have expectations of being one type of person. Like even just going to nursing school, even things like that. That was so much pressure on me. I almost felt like it was wrong to not pick a major in the science field or, to be a doctor one day, you know?
Right. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
deep
like
thoughts.
no, it's just it's really interesting because I guess like in your case it's like go starting from in and going out, but for
Yeah,
me it's almost like I never felt like I was Filipino enough, but lately I've been like learning a lot more about it. I
that's
guess
awesome.
just like because I like hardly see it, it kind of forces me to stand my ground almost, like
Yeah.
I decide that this is my identity. Like I love being like, I love being Filipino and I'm also
Hmm.
Canadian, so I love being Canadian too. And um, I refuse to conform to like whatever standard is out there. Like I'm not going to just act a certain way because that's what's like quote unquote like culturally appropriate for New York City.
Yeah.
I guess just like I never want to feel like I'm not proud of my culture or like my background, which is why I'm very glad that it's like we have like AAPI Heritage Month. It's like a time
Hmm.
to like celebrate, um, but also like on the flip side, just the fact that now there's all this like hatred and like racism being pointed towards Asians.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of stuff that you know it kind of like makes you kind of like scared or ashamed to be
Yeah.
who you are. But I just never want to feel that way. So um, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I guess I've just kind of been more resolved to like uh, to maintain my cultural identity and like really just like explore it in whatever facets come about.
So tell me about the online groups. I didn't realize it was all online actually. Is it people that you know from your school or just like everywhere globally?
It's so there's a few groups. I
Hmm.
guess like I could just tell you the story. So in the height of the pandemic last year, this was around like mid March.
Yeah.
My friend Mary Shen Benson, so she is a 50-year MD PhD at NYU, and she happens to be in a lab with like my best friends.
Wow.
So I remember, like, I met her because I was visiting my friends at some point, and then we were like, "Oh my god, wait, are you Filipino?" And she was like, "Oh my god, there's one person." I was like, "Wow, I cannot believe it." So that's kind of how the friendship started. But anyway, so come mid March, she got recruited to join this like Filipino American like medical student group
Hmm.
called CFAM. So CFAM stands for the Council of Young Filipinx Americans in Medicine. And she was recruited to basically organize a research symposium,
Hmm.
like for the group. And because I just happened to be the only other Filipino that she knew at the institution, she ended up emailing me to join. And I was like, bro, I'm like so down to do it. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I think it was really through that experience, working with CFAM and like organizing like this conference for
Yeah.
to highlight like the work of fellow Filipinos in medicine. Like that just instilled so much pride in me, to see like all these other people with my face, with my cultural background, getting like super excited about something I'm also very excited about, which is like medical work and science. So October of 2019, we hosted our first like conference.
Hmm.
And it was the first of its kind, like ever. You never really like generally research conferences. They are centered around a particular topic, like say like I don't know cancer immunology or
Hmm.
structural biology or something along those lines. But this was the first time that anyone had held a conference just to celebrate the achievements of Filipinos. So all of our talks, or like all of our researchers and all of our presenters are Filipino, and it was all across the U.S. too. Like I think we literally had representation from all 50 states
Wow.
in that conference. Um, and yeah, we basically just got to highlight the work of like fellow Filipinos in medicine, in science, and in particular like those studying Filipino health disparities, because that is a very like niche field, and
Mhm.
just like a tangent on that, um, like the issue is that like in public health and like community health is that like when you think about Asians, you normally think of like East Asians, and all the data that is out there, they tend to clump like basically all the Asians together as one number, but
Yeah.
then the problem is like you need to actually like zoom into like the Asian category and like parse out the different ethnicities to really see like what's going on. So, one of the big things in the news lately has been how Filipino nurses make up, I think, like 4% of all nurses in the US and yet make up 30% of COVID related deaths.
Wow, I
Um,
didn't even know of that.
and that's just Filipinos. So, there's a reason for that, which like I'm not going to get into, but there's some papers out there that you can like read on it.
Mhm.
But that's why it's so important, to study like specifically like health disparities for Filipinos. And there was this one thing that I remember Dr. Nina Ponce from UCLA. She's like a researcher. I remember her telling us like, no one's gonna do it but us. Like we
Yeah.
can't afford to wait for someone else to like do this like research and do this work. Like, we have no choice but like to just help ourselves. So like yeah, so I guess just like through this like past year, like especially like with the whole public health stuff, um, it's just really opened my eyes to like this like totally new field. I'm a basic science researcher, and I didn't
Mhm.
realize just how impactful like epidemiology and public health were, and in particular like the amount of work that can go towards like helping like the Filipino community specifically. And so after the conference, I started getting involved in hosting this speaker series known as the Filipino American Health Forum, and
Mhm.
this was like a speaker series that was done in collaboration with like the Association of Philippine Physicians in America, as well as like other Filipino groups like in on the East Coast. So the Filipino Nurses Association, NAFA, Kalusugan Coalition, and we're also working with like the Philippine Consulate in New York. And basically, the idea is to just highlight Filipino researchers and just have them talk about their research and, in particular, how it pertains to, like COVID-19
Yeah.
or mental health. We also had to talk about like racism, about the vaccines. So it's just like all these things. But like the important thing is that it's being told by like a Filipino, and then B, because it's being told by a Filipino, they can like culturally tailor their talk to
Yeah.
other Filipinos. So it's just been like, a really great time trying to, I guess, like get like, or communicate science like to such a niche population of people.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think we've been making a big splash. Like our 18th episode is next week, so
Yeah.
it's been picking up really quickly. Like we got like so many guests, um, and and yeah, also just being able to like see all these like powerhouse researchers across the U.S. And like just knowing they exist, like that's been a joy. Um, on top of that, so this is all stuff like in America, but I've also been
Mhm.
helping out with like another like Filipino science group up in Canada. So back home, like so after all of this work, I guess like I just become a little like notorious for
Yeah.
all this like gotta like support Filipino excellence in science,
Yeah.
and so I ended up getting recruited to yet another like research group
That's
up in
awesome.
Toronto. Yeah, so it's been a lot. Honestly, it's a little overwhelming because now I'm juggling like all of these things on top of like my own PhD. Oh, and
Yeah.
speaking of which, oh my god, I guess like the one last big thing is I'm also working with what's Tayo Help and Philpro. So
Mhm.
Tayo Help is like, in case you guys don't know, is this it's this website that provides like all this like up to date COVID-19 information, but also translates it into Tagalog so
Oh,
that
wow.
elderly people can like have a reliable source of information and also like have it like be easily accessible to fellow Filipinos.
Mhm.
So a subset of this committee, um, led by Dr. Isa Palma of in Chicago. So she and like a group of us students are conducting this COVID-19 vaccine survey study, where we're looking at cultural reasons um, for vaccine hesitancy, that
Mhm.
are like specifically like Filipino cultural reasons. So, for example, like I don't want to get the vaccine because maybe like this idea of I guess like oh like I'll leave it up to God kind of thing. Oh, bahalat na.
Yeah.
That's like
Wahala na,
the term.
yes.
Yeah. So it's like oh bahalat na. Like I'm going to not get the vaccine because whatever happens happens. Like God's got
Mhm.
me. Like it's his path. So that could be like a cultural reason, or maybe uh there was this like dang vaccine incident that happened a couple years ago back in the Philippines, where they like really botched this one vaccine and everyone got sick from it. Uh, and that could be like another thing that's like specific to Filipinos. So
Yeah.
we're basically like we've been waiting for like the IRB approval, but then the minute we get it, we're going to be like disseminating out the survey to understand, yeah, like reasons behind vaccine hesitancy in the Filipino community. So honestly, it's been a lot of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. That's amazing though, because you're really being involved and just being a part of raising awareness, because there's not really a lot of, even in movies, Filipino representation. I mean, there is like slowly Asians and stuff, but I hate that they always portray them as successful, rich, living it easy, having a good life.
Right, right.
And that's really not the case, not even just here in the US, but in the Philippines. That's not the case at all. And I wish they did give that more realistic point of view, just because, you know, when they see that, they think, oh, they don't need my help, or, you know, why do they care about us? Or even just like snotty, bratty, like,
No, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. But actually, if I could like recommend, I've recently been reading this book. Like
Oh, I
it's
love book
Arsenic and Adobo.
recommendations. Yes. What is it?
Arsenic and Adobo.
Okay.
It's so good. It's written by like a Filipino American author, and the
Mhm.
characters in that book are Filipino. So it's just like it was really the first time that like I've like witnessed any form of media that like specifically had like a Filipino character, and
Wow.
it had like all the nuances that like it's just like all the almost like quote unquote like cultural inside jokes,
Yeah.
um, like Sus Mariosep or like Jusko. Like that's like stuff that they would say in the book, and I got so excited. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's a new book that just came out, I think, like a couple of weeks ago. I highly recommend it. If you're looking for, like I guess Filipino representation in media. Like I know it's just a book; it's not the same as Game of
Oh, but
Thrones or
books
like a
books are
movie.
great
Oh,
still.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So highly recommend it. It's fantastic.
I'm gonna add that to my list after I finish one of my horror novels. I've been kind of slow with reading, and I used to read a lot when I was younger. I don't know if you really remember that, but I used to read a lot. And even playing music, it's been difficult for me to even make time for that. So I have a piano in my apartment. I have my guitar, ukulele. I haven't touched them like more than 3 times since I've lived here, and I've been here since last May. And I feel like that's also just another way to connect with the Filipino culture, because, even like reading books with Filipino characters and just, the typical things that Filipinos would do and say, there's also songs that you can learn. And like, I feel like I should get in touch with that more, especially because I, you know, am blessed with the talent of being able to sing and play
I was gonna
instruments.
say, I was gonna
I
say, like, girl,
know, I
use that
know.
voice.
I know. And that's also a reason why, like, I feel like, again, I'll get back to you when I talk to a therapist about this and really understand like the center or the root of why I'm always feeling so not 100%. Like I always feel like a piece of me is missing or lost. I think it, kind of ties into the fact that, like, for example, my Filipino church that I used to go to, I would sing there. We would have religious musicals, and yes, sometimes they were extremely religious and overdramatic, but it was at least something in music and acting and like the arts, and that was something I was really passionate and kind of just enjoying back when I was younger. And then all of a sudden, college hit, and obviously nothing was like there for you to be forced, to get into art, into music, into playing your instrument. So it was like basically your own personal choice. You had to make the time for it, and it just became so hard for me. And I think that that's like a really big piece of me that I kind of am recently like losing touch with. And I hate that. And I hate that I'm aware of it and not really doing too much about it.
Hmm.
And I just, again, I'm trying to figure out like why I'm losing that motivation. So I don't know. I'll hopefully figure it out.
No, I mean, like, this is so highly relatable because I'm the same way. Like,
I was just
I'm,
gonna ask you.
yeah, no, because I literally also have my piano, my guitar, and my
Yeah.
ukulele, like, in my apartment. And, like, literally, like, this very moment, my piano is just being used to, like, I needed an extra surface to
Me too.
put all my laundry on. So I just have a bunch of folded clothes on my piano.
Oh, that's so funny. Me too right now. I have clothes on it. That's so
Yeah,
funny.
right. It's so unfortunate. But I will say though, so one of my friends here, who's like this like talented pianist,
Hmm.
he told me that like he's like I think like 5 years older than me. He's
Yeah.
29 going on 30. Um, but he told me that like the reason he's so good now is because when you really think about it, right? Like if you learn one bar of a song per day, like that's not even that much of a commitment. But if you really stick to it for like several years, then eventually, well, that's like a lot of these songs that you're gonna learn. So I guess
Yeah, that's true.
it's like take baby steps. Like instead of setting this goal of oh my god, I need to like get back into piano, and it's like super overwhelming.
Hmm.
Maybe like go like baby steps, like something manageable that you can do after work.
Yeah.
Um, like yeah, like one bar from some song. I don't know, but
Yeah,
that's like
because
really helped. Yeah.
I was gonna say you are a killer at piano playing, like 100,000 times better than
No,
me.
don't say that.
And
Don't say that.
no, but for real, you're really good with it. And I just, now that we're talking about it, I just miss it. I just miss like even when we used to hang out sometimes, or my sister and some of my church friends, we would literally play for hours and just go on, and
I
we
miss
just
that
watch each
so
other.
much.
And it
Right.
was just, yeah, like so relaxing. And I really like need to get back to that because it was really just a way to keep me grounded and not so in my head all the time. I
No,
feel
for
like
sure.
that's really like, yeah, like a main thing with me, that I'm not distracting, but I guess I'm not putting my heart and soul into like my side passions like music. And that's causing my brain to basically be overworked all the time, and then cue anxiety and sleeping
Right.
and waking up in the middle of the night for no reason thinking about like all this stuff.
Hmm. No, definitely. Like you need to have something on the side to I guess like get rid of like all that stress from work. Because if it's
Yeah.
literally just, oh, you're going to work, then you go home, then you go to work, then you go home, like you're gonna get burnt out. And your mental health is gonna suffer for it.
Yeah.
So, that's why they always say work life balance is super, super important. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and like it doesn't have to be music, it could be, like working out or cooking or just anything other than like doom scrolling on Instagram, like
Yep.
in your bed every day.
Guilty. It's TikTok for me.
I like. Am I a boomer? I don't have a TikTok account, but it's specifically because every single person I know has like told me that they spend basically just like hours on this app, and I'm like, I'm not prepared for that. Like, I don't think I can like have yet another app that I'm just gonna sink like all of my time into. So I just like avoided getting it at all costs.
Yeah, I mean, like, I already got rid of Facebook, and then TikTok came up, and it's basically becoming like the time that I use on Facebook. But I will say, kind of tying back into Filipino heritage and like awareness, there are actually a growing amount of Filipino videos that I'm seeing on TikTok. And I think that's awesome just because I think I was talking to my friends about this yesterday. TikTok is becoming like some sort of community where I feel like, yes, there are still haters and like people who write mean comments, and that's always going to happen. But I feel like there's just a lot more awareness that there's so many different cultures in America,
Hmm.
and I think that's so cool. That's like one positive that I see from TikTok besides watching like hours of wasteless videos. There's always that one quality video that you're like, wow, I'm really glad I have a TikTok.
No, for sure. And actually, it's funny that you say that because, like, so I would say that TikTok is like the app for like, I guess, like the current young generation.
Yeah.
Like we're such millennials, but it's like, what's what's the term after us? Like Gen Z or like whatever Gen
Gen
X?
Z.
Bro, I don't know anymore. But basically, so one of my friends who, so she's like a teacher now. She
Yeah.
told me that like this generation of high school students is like they are so nice, and
Yeah.
it's because I think like social media these days has just had such a huge influence
Hmm.
in shifting like this paradigm and like you know like allowing them to like experience like all these different cultures and just be like more
Yeah.
accepting as a community, you know um like people are just like more like I hate to say it but like PC, but also just in general like just more accepting of people who are different from them.
Yeah.
So you know I don't want to say that TikTok is changing the world, but like in a way it is, and it's really great that there's a new platform that allows like others to see like different parts of life that they might not normally experience if they live in just like general white suburbia. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And also, growing up, I was always weird with social media in the sense that, like, they're always exposing some really crazy stuff. Like, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in the country, in the world that, like, we're not really aware of half the time. And I think that also kind of ties into the fact that Gen Z or whatever name the generation is, um, that they're becoming kind of more aware that there really is stuff going on with everybody, and it's kind of like they have this mindset that like everybody's going through their own stuff. So I think that's cool. I've definitely seen it not just in my sister, my brother, he's still in high school, and the things that he says sometimes I'm like, wow, like that's not what I was thinking when I was your age.
Right, they're like so much more mature than I was.
I
I was
know.
wow, like I just think of like my pictures back in like 2008 with like my
Oh
Walmart t-shirt
no.
and like like
Oh
the
no.
bangs, and
Yes.
then like you know I don't know, I was just like not, I was still a child, but like 14-year-olds these days, wow, they are like so mature.
Yeah, that's awesome to me. At least to see. I mean, hey, maybe they are growing up too fast, whatever. But just some of the ways that they see the world, it gives me hope that, a lot of stuff that's going on in the country right now, it's going to get better. It makes me feel a little better like knowing that these children have that kind of awareness and they're kind of changing how older generations looked at things.
Right. And then also, when we have kids one day, we'll also be like raising
Yeah.
like our children with these values. So it kind of just like, it'll propagate over time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, which is like
So
really
speaking of
nice.
children, I know it's a distant topic, but is there something, I guess, major? It doesn't have to be negative or positive, but I've always thought about this and I love asking people this. Based on your growth and experience and just how you're raised versus, how you see everything now, is there like something major that you constantly tell yourself, like, oh, when I have kids, I want to make sure that they, either are aware of this or know of this or learn things in a certain way?
Hmm. That is an interesting question, honestly. I guess so. Maybe this doesn't like answer the question exactly, but
Mhm.
there are like a couple of things that come to mind when I think about my future children. For
Mhm.
example, one is I was having this conversation with a friend, and we were talking about our like the lunches that we would bring back in elementary school. I think we were talking about Dunkaroos, and that's how it came up.
Yum.
Yeah, I haven't seen those in a long time, but basically, like I was talking about how I would bring. literally rice and adobo, and that would be like perfectly acceptable because I was like really fortunate to grow up um, in a community where there were actually a lot of Filipinos in high school and elementary school.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so strange to have my fork and spoon and, you know, my machado or like my sinigang in a Tupperware and just eat that for lunch, you know, despite everyone else eating sandwiches and whatnot. But my friend who grew up like somewhere in Jersey, uh, he had the opposite experience where because his school was predominantly white, you know, anything that was different was like just frowned upon. And he was telling me the story about how it was like his birthday one time and his mom made him a tray of bibinka to share with like all of the other kids at school. So he
Hmm.
brought it and then not a single person touched the bibinka. So he was like really ashamed and he actually ended up tossing out the whole tray uh,
Wow.
because he was like, yeah, like just so ashamed that like and embarrassed that no one ate it. So, and then I think from then on, he also insisted on you know only bringing like sandwiches and Lunchables for lunch instead of like normal Filipino food. And like to me, that really hurts. Just that idea that you know like he was shamed into, I guess like not eating like
Yeah.
the food that his mom would provide him. And so I guess like I've also thought about, you know, what would happen if my child one day came home and was like, "Hi mom, like I don't want to eat your adobo anymore. Like can you make me a sandwich
Yeah.
for lunch from now on?" I guess like that would just honestly hurt because it's just it goes back again to that idea of like, you know, I never want them to be ashamed of their culture, regardless,
Yeah.
you know, Filipino, whoever I marry, like if they also have a background that's different. Like I just never want them to like not be proud of their heritage. And food is like a very big one for
Hmm.
like for us. So I don't know how I would approach that, but I guess like that's like one big thing for me. Like I hope that they never feel ashamed of eating Filipino food, and I hope they like enjoy it as much as I do, because
Yeah.
that is like what I predominantly cook, like even now, for myself.
What's your
Uh,
favorite Filipino food?
um, that's a
Just
my
curious. I
favorite
wonder
my
if it'll
favorite
match
one
mine.
my favorite one to cook is machado.
Yes.
Uh, but my favorite one overall is lumpiang sariwa, which is like really controversial, but it's just the way that my
Hmm.
mom makes it in particular. It is
Yeah.
so good. Like every time I go home, she'll like always make it. Like she already knows that that's like the one thing I always want. So I just always associate it with that, like homecoming, but also it's so fantastic. Um,
Wow.
yeah, but yeah. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is like you know being an immigrant and like you know starting from basically nothing
Hmm.
and then you know uh, like working my way up to like where I am now. I guess you know I just had this mentality also of like I want to make sure that my kids don't have to grow up like thinking that they're not able to do certain things because of financial stuff.
Yeah.
uh, so like I'll always joke about like you know quote unquote like being like a tiger mom like oh my kid has to like go to Kumon and like have to like you know do
Come
ballet
on.
and like
I
play like
can't.
three different instruments or like learn like five languages. But I think like really the sentiment is like you know in the end of the day I'm not going to force them to do something that they don't like, but
Yeah.
I want to like be able to at least like you know have a good enough job that I can at least provide them like access to like all these like extracurriculars because I definitely did not have that growing up.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I guess those are like the two major things for me.
How the top two things for me, it kind of ties in with your second point about, having the resources because obviously, they've been blessed with so many resources. And I always like think of my parents because they're always like telling me, even my brother, they tried so many things for my brother. They did karate, soccer, Kumon too, actually, now that we're talking about
Yeah,
it. And he hated all of them. And they were just so frustrated because, he was given the opportunity and he really didn't like give it a chance. And I'm sure it's just from being a kid. It's just something like, you do it and you don't like it. But, when you get older and you really don't have the time for it, you kind of regret it, you know what I mean? Like you had the time to do all that and now, you don't really know what you want to do or you don't have the time for it anymore. So
right.
I feel
Oh,
like
that's That's another thing I'm really scared of. Because I guess like,
Yeah.
I was able to grow up and just like really appreciate everything that we had because we
Yes.
didn't start from much. Like I still remember like living in that house in Tondo and like,
Mhm.
my fifth birthday or my sorry, my fifth birthday party was like in this tiny ass alley. Like I
Yeah.
still remember everything. So
I can't believe you remember that.
like that's probably one of my first memories for sure. But I still remember like the house and
Yeah.
how crazy it was like back in Manila. So I just grew up appreciating like having piano lessons and getting to eat the food that I wanted, and going out for like pizza every month or so.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess like one of my worries is that if my children never really like experience that, like will they kind of just like squander like all these opportunities and
Yeah.
kind of just let it go to waste? Um, yeah.
I think that it's definitely going to be different for us, especially because we've seen both sides of the coin. And obviously, our future kids are going to be growing up on the side
On
where
the
there's
nicer
more
side.
opportunity. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't want to say nicer, but
I mean,
yes, exactly. It
first
is
world
nicer.
country, yeah, like.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And yeah, I do worry. That's the same worry for me too. But I think that I don't know, honestly, like my parents always joked to like, if you keep acting up, we're gonna go to the Philippines and we'll show you, we'll humble you, blah blah blah. And
Hmm.
I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact that like, I do want to bring them back to the Philippines and have them not humble themselves necessarily, but just be exposed to the fact that like, you have so much more than you are taking advantage of or really realizing.
Hmm.
And my sister has never gone to the Philippines, and not saying she's a brat or anything, but I do think about that often that that she definitely is aware of like, what she has, and she's grateful for it, but I think that having that experience alone, just going to somewhere that's maybe a little different from how your life is now, it's very eye-opening and humbling at the same time, honestly.
Hmm. For sure.
I miss that. I haven't been back to the Philippines since I was like 10 or 11.
Oh wow.
So I definitely am overdue for that.
I feel that for sure.
Wait, but this is random. Do you remember our like not conjoined? Did we ever have a conjoined birthday in Jollibee? Was that I don't know why I remember that.
I don't remember that, but that sounds like something that would happen.
I don't know why. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna ask my mom and get back to you because I'm pretty sure either we had a conjoined one or you had one and I had one, and of course it was at Jollibee because Jollibee was like everything in the Philippines
Yeah,
when we
I
were
mean,
younger.
you're like what, like 2 weeks younger than me, so I believe that.
Yes. But yeah, that's kind of the first thing. And the second thing that's kind of really major to me is communication. And I didn't have a lot of that when I was younger. It really honestly, I had to be the one to kind of turn that stone and really start opening up to my parents for not just them to like realize that hey, I'm a growing person, I'm a little different from you, but also for me to realize that they are also different from how I've been kind of frustrated with them because in high school I was very like hard-headed. I was like, I don't understand why, they're not letting me go to the movies when there's boys, they're not letting me hang out on my friends. They're not letting me sleep over. And I would get so mad. And I always feel terrible looking back at it just because I didn't fully grasp at the fact that they were, from a different time, from a different culture. And
Hmm.
every day I still think about that. And it makes me so grateful now for at least my ability to see that in them and not be so like harsh when I'm being told certain things that I don't like sometimes or I don't necessarily agree with.
Hmm. Right. Aw.
Yeah, it's just yeah, that's important to communication. And I've honestly like for a very long time I've had a lot of issues opening up just even to like Marcos, my boyfriend. I still sometimes am like super uncomfortable like really talking. That's again why I'm scared to go to a therapist because I can't even open up to the people close around me. So that's like my worst fear. Like, I can't even do that. So let alone somebody who's like a neutral party, but I'm feeling good about it. I think I'm accepting it more and just, kind of not forcing myself, but just telling myself that hey, like communication is actually good for you. So,
Right, right. But also, like, since you bring up the therapy thing again, like, don't
yeah.
worry about it. And also, it is so different from talking to someone close to you because I think, like, you know, your partner does not need to hear about like every single little thing,
No,
or
you're right. I agree with that. Yeah.
like there's some things that I will talk to with my therapist that I wouldn't bring up with my best friend, I guess is like what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. And but I know that
Yeah.
like, they care and are willing to listen to whatever, but
Of course.
um like, you know, it's also they're not a therapist. It's not their
Mhm.
job to help me out with like, my social anxiety or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not qualified to do so. They don't have a PsyD. So, you know, don't stress out about that kind of stuff. And like, I hope that like whoever you end up meeting on Monday, like they are able to at the very least like foster an environment where you feel safe and like, just feel open to like share whatever's on your mind. And yeah, then
Yeah.
you kind of just get the hang of it like over time.
Yeah, I'm always it's always just the first time. I'm nervous, but
No, for sure,
you
for
know,
sure.
yeah, it's funny how many people I've just been talking about this week alone about just therapy in general, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that there's so many people around me that are actually like talking. Even my best friend, she just recently started going to a therapist, and I just obviously now that I'm being more exposed to it, it's just really changing how I'm seeing therapy in general. So I'm excited.
Right. Yeah,
I
no,
think
I mean, like
I'm
I
ready.
said, it's so much more common than you think it is.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is why, again, like the stigma of like just not being able to talk about it, like there's no shame
yeah, yeah,
in like going to a therapist. If anything, it's like super healthy that like, you recognize that there's like this problem and you're doing something about
yeah.
it. So,
You're so right.
it's the opposite thing. It's like, you should be proud of yourself for giving it a shot. So, yeah.
I'm excited. But thank you so I didn't even the hour goes by so freaking fast. But honestly, just big thank you. I That was really amazing for you to open up, especially just here in this space and just know that, you're always welcome to come back if you ever want to come back and I really appreciate it. And, I'm excited to talk to you about therapy more outside of this episode.
No, for sure. Thanks again for like having me. This is
Of
like so fun.
course. And also, if you have any like conference links or just the Filipino groups, and then what's it called? Just all of the groups that you were talking about. I'd love if you could like send me links to them. If even you have like events or conferences coming up, because I love to
Oh,
go to
yeah.
one.
No,
I
for
do
sure, for
see them
sure.
sometimes on Instagram. I just like can't. Sometimes
Everyone's
I'm
like
just like,
has Zoom fatigue too, so it's fine. Like no
yes,
worries. But like with that being said, like if I can like plug, so we have like an upcoming episode of the Filipino
yeah,
American Health Forum next Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and we're
mhm.
inviting people from like the Department of Health in the Philippines as well as a doctor who works at UP General
Wow,
to basically um, talk about like the COVID situation in the Philippines and then contrast that to like the COVID situation here in the US.
yeah,
So it's kind of like a little like summit between like the doctors, um, just to like, get ideas from each other on how they can like, approach the situation in the community as well as in the hospital. So that's coming up. Um, and like if any of your listeners are, pre-meds or medical students, like
hmm
I highly recommend they join like that medical group I'm in, so the Council of Young Filipinx Americans in Medicine. We have like a lot of like mentorship opportunities with like med students and like residents attendings, and we're just like really strong advocates for like the medical pipeline, like the medical
yeah.
education pipeline. So that's like really great. And we have a conference coming up in October, so if, you want to present or come check out, support like fellow Filipino excellence, look out for that.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks, definitely. Thanks for sharing. I'm so excited for you, and you just keep doing amazing things. Honestly, I'm blessed to have you as my cousin, straight up. And that's it for now, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode, and I was super excited to share it with you. And if you guys have any questions or concerns or topics, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. My Instagram and TikTok are at Philline Podcast, and my Twitter is at Philline. And if you're interested in any of the groups that my cousin mentioned, as well as the book that she mentioned, it's all in the description. So that's it for now. Thank you guys. Till next time. Bye.